Instead, he openly acknowledges that many men, including himself, have experienced failure, temptation, weakness, and poor decisions. But according to him, failure itself does not define someone permanently. The real danger is remaining trapped without ever getting back up. He encourages men as listening not believe the lie that they are too broken to change. Wisdom means learning to mature out of destructive patterns instead of staying controlled by them forever. Some people were raised inside unhealthy environments and never learned better examples, but growth becomes possible when someone finally chooses a different direction. The speaker specifically addresses men who may feel ashamed because they do not fit society's expectations. He says a man is not weak because he avoided sleeping with many women. He is not less masculine because he remains sober, disciplined, or faithful. The world may mock those choices, but according to Scripture, restraint and integrity actually demonstrate strength. Then he introduces a powerful observation hidden within Proverbs 31 itself. Before Lemuel's mother ever describes the qualities of a virtuous woman, she first spends time confronting the condition of her son's character. The speaker pauses dramatically because he believes this changes how people should understand relationships entirely. He explains that many people spend enormous energy searching for the right person while ignoring their own personal growth. But according to this mother's wisdom, becoming the right person matters just as much as finding one. A healthy relationship cannot thrive if someone lacks the maturity, discipline, and emotional capacity necessary to sustain it. The speaker says this truth applies everywhere. Someone may find an incredible partner, but if their own character remains undeveloped, insecurity, selfishness, addiction, immaturity, or pride can still destroy the relationship. Good relationships require more than attraction. They require growth, stability, and responsibility from both people involved. He emphasizes this point repeatedly because modern dating culture often focuses entirely on external traits while ignoring deeper issues of character. People create long lists describing what they want in another person, but rarely stop to ask whether they themselves are becoming trustworthy, emotionally healthy, and spiritually mature enough to build something meaningful. According to him, this is why Lemuel's mother focuses on her son first. She understands that if he eventually encounters a wise and virtuous woman, his own lack of character could still ruin the relationship. Before searching for the right woman, he needed to become the right kind of man. The speaker reveals another surprising detail about Proverbs 31. Historically, the chapter was not originally written as instructions for women. It was written as wisdom directed toward men. The famous description of the virtuous woman was intended to teach men what kind of character and qualities should truly matter when choosing a life partner. This completely challenges modern misunderstandings of the passage. Many people treat Proverbs 31 like a checklist forcing women to achieve impossible standards. But according to the speaker, the original purpose was actually to guide men away from shallow priorities and toward recognizing genuine wisdom, integrity, and virtue. He says culture trains men to prioritize beauty, status, appearance, and physical attraction above everything else. But Proverbs 31 pushes deeper, teaching men to value character, faithfulness, wisdom, kindness, discipline, and spiritual strength. Those qualities create lasting relationships while external beauty alone eventually fades with time. The speaker then turns directly toward the men listening and challenges them honestly. He says nobody has the right to demand excellence, loyalty, and maturity from a future spouse while refusing to work on themselves first. Relationships become healthier when both people pursue growth instead of simply criticizing each other's flaws. He briefly addresses married men as well, suggesting that some frustrations inside marriages are connected not only to one spouse's behavior, but also to unresolved issues within the husband himself. Sometimes people become so focused on changing their partner that they never examine the condition of their own hearts, attitudes, or habits. According to him, true leadership begins with personal accountability. A man who wants respect must first become respectable. A man who wants trust must become trustworthy. A man who wants peace inside his home must learn discipline, humility, patience, and emotional maturity himself. The speaker becomes deeply passionate again while discussing how society desperately needs men willing to rise above destructive cultural standards. Communities need fathers who stay present. Children need role models with integrity. Women need partners capable of leadership, protection, and faithfulness. Churches need men willing to serve purpose instead of ego. He argues that the world already has enough examples of reckless masculinity. People constantly see celebrities, influencers, athletes, and entertainers glorifying selfishness, addiction, infidelity, and pride. What society lacks are visible examples of men who pursue wisdom, responsibility, compassion, and moral courage. That's why he keeps repeating the phrase, "Come higher." He believes God is inviting men toward a completely different way of living. Not a life defined by shame or perfectionism, but a life moving steadily toward growth, healing, integrity, and purpose. The speaker explains that many men secretly want this kind of transformation but feel trapped by past mistakes. Some carry guilt from failed relationships. Others struggle with pornography, addiction, anger, insecurity, or emotional wounds they have never fully confronted. Some feel too damaged to believe meaningful change is even possible anymore. But according to him, God does not reject people because of their struggles. Instead, God continually invites them closer despite those struggles. Spiritual growth begins not when someone becomes flawless, but when they stop running away and start honestly seeking healing and wisdom. He reminds the audience that every person eventually serves some people become controlled by lust, others by pride, greed, fear, addiction, validation, or comparison. But true freedom begins when someone learns to surrender those controlling influences and build their life around something greater than temporary emotion. Then he paints a picture of what life can become when someone develops genuine character. A man who grows in integrity leaves behind a different legacy. His children respect him. His relationships become healthier. His influence carries weight because people trust his example rather than merely listening to his words. According to the speaker, mature people should desire this type of growth naturally. Only immaturity celebrates remaining trapped in destructive behavior forever. Real wisdom recognizes that life improves when character improves. The process may be difficult, but the results are worth it. He returns once more to honoring the overlooked mother behind Proverbs 31. While millions celebrate the virtuous woman described later in the chapter, few stop to appreciate the wisdom, devotion, and spiritual insight of the woman who originally taught these truths to her son. Her voice quietly shaped generations through the wisdom she passed down. The speaker believes her message still matters today because the same cultural pressures continue existing in modern society. Men are still tempted by lust, pride, addiction, distraction, and misuse of influence. Families still need wisdom. Communities still need integrity. Young people still need guidance, pointing them towards something higher than empty cultural trends. As the sermon approaches its emotional climax, the speaker asks important questions directly to the audience. If a man desires a meaningful relationship someday, what kind of woman should truly be worth pursuing? If a woman desires growth, what kind of character should she cultivate? If parents are raising daughters and sons, what values should they intentionally teach inside the home? According to him, these are the deeper questions Proverbs 31 forces people to confront. The chapter is not merely about relationships. It is about wisdom, identity, standards, purpose, and becoming the kind of person capable of building a meaningful life that honors God and blesses others. As the message moves toward its final moments, the atmosphere becomes far more emotional and personal. The speaker shifts from teaching principles into speaking directly to the hearts of the men listening. Up to this point, he has challenged cultural lies, exposed destructive habits, and explained the wisdom behind Proverbs 31. But now his focus turns toward healing, restoration, and hope for those silently struggling beneath the surface. He begins praying openly, asking God to reach for carrying hidden pain, insecurity, addiction, frustration, or emotional wounds. His words become less like a formal sermon and more like a conversation between a father and sons who desperately need encouragement. He acknowledges that many men spend years pretending to be strong while secretly drowning inside battles nobody else can see. According to him, cultural pressure often teaches men to suppress weakness rather than confront it honestly. Men are expected to appear confident, emotionally untouchable, and self-sufficient even when their inner lives are falling apart. Because of that pressure, many suffer silently with lust, shame, fear, depression, anger, addiction, or feelings of worthlessness while convincing everyone around them they are fine. The speaker says God sees through all of that pretending. God sees the tears nobody else notices, the frustration hidden behind fake confidence, the loneliness buried beneath humor, and the insecurity masked by pride or arrogance. More importantly, he insists that God's response to those struggles is not rejection, but compassion. He repeatedly tells the audience that God is not angry at broken people for being broken. Instead, God invites wounded people closer so healing can begin. The speaker says many men mistakenly run away from God because they assume their failures disqualify them, but in reality, those moments are often the very places where transformation starts. He speaks directly to men trapped in cycles of pornography, addiction, unhealthy relationships, and emotional darkness. Instead of condemning them harshly, he encourages them not to remain stuck there forever. According to him, struggling does not make someone hopeless. Staying trapped without seeking help is what becomes dangerous. The speaker passionately explains that spiritual growth is a process. Some men may stumble repeatedly while trying to overcome destructive habits, but each time they return to God, instead of surrendering completely, something inside them grows stronger. Progress may happen slowly, but persistence matters. He describes a man dropping his phone during temptation and falling to his knees in prayer, asking God for strength. Maybe he fails one day and gets back up the next. Maybe he struggles again later but still refuses to stop seeking change. According to the speaker, those repeated moments of returning to God slowly build spiritual resilience over time. The message then becomes even more compassionate. The speaker says he senses God speaking directly to certain men listening in the room. He describes God saying, "I see your struggles, I see your pain, I see your insecurities. Don't run from me. Run toward me." The emotional tone of the room intensifies because many people relate deeply to those words. He tells the audience that God understands confusion and doubt. Some people may not fully understand faith yet. Others may still question spiritual truths or wrestle with uncertainty. But according to the speaker, God is not demanding perfect understanding before inviting someone closer. The invitation remains open even for people still figuring things out. That idea becomes central to the entire closing section. The speaker says it is okay not to have everything together right now. It is okay to struggle. It is okay to feel broken, confused, uncertain, or wounded. What matters most is refusing to stay permanently trapped in those conditions without reaching toward healing. He continues emphasizing that God already knows every hidden issue inside a person's life. There is no need to hide addiction, insecurity, lust, bitterness, or fear because nothing remains hidden from him anyway. The problem is not whether God sees the struggle. The problem is whether people are willing to stop hiding from the one capable of helping them heal. According to the speaker, too many men isolate themselves emotionally. Instead of seeking accountability, prayer, mentorship, or honest conversation, they bury their pain deeper and deeper until destructive habits become normal. But isolation often strengthens darkness while connection begins weakening it. He strongly encourages men to stop carrying everything alone, bring struggles into the light, talk to trusted people, pray honestly, seek accountability. According to him, healing becomes possible when people stop pretending and finally become honest about what they need. Then the speaker returns to one of the core ideas from earlier in the sermon. God is calling men toward higher standards because he sees greater purpose inside them. The invitation toward purity, discipline, wisdom, and integrity is not meant to destroy joy. It is meant to protect purpose and lead people toward healthier lives. He says many cultural narratives promise freedom while secretly producing emptiness. Endless lust, addiction, materialism, pride, and selfishness may feel exciting temporarily, but eventually they leave people emotionally drained and spiritually exhausted. God's wisdom, however, leads toward wholeness even when the process feels challenging at first. The speaker passionately explains that the enemy often uses distraction to pull men away from their purpose. Lust distracts focus, addiction weakens discipline, bitterness poisons relationships. Shame convinces people to stay hidden. Over time, those things slowly derail lives that were meant for something far greater. But he believes restoration remains possible. Men can become better fathers, husbands, brothers, leaders, friends, and examples regardless of past mistakes. The process begins when someone finally decides to stop glorifying destructive habits and start pursuing healing and character instead. Then he shifts toward discussing legacy. According to him, every man eventually leaves something behind, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Some leave behind pain, instability, and brokenness. Others leave behind integrity, wisdom, compassion, and strength. Character shapes not only personal destiny, but also the future of families and communities. He says one of the greatest gifts a man can leave his children is not money or status, but integrity. Sons and daughters remember consistency, presence, honesty, and love far longer than material success. A man who grows in wisdom creates a different environment around everyone connected to his life. The speaker then revisits the role women play in encouraging healthy masculinity. He tells women not to tear men down constantly, but to encourage growth, purpose, and responsibility. Healthy relationships should challenge people lovingly rather than enabling destructive behavior or crushing someone beneath endless criticism. At the same time, he also reminds women not to settle for men unwilling to pursue maturity. Standards matter, character matters, accountability matters. According to him, genuine love should push people toward becoming better rather than remaining stagnant. He says society desperately needs examples of honorable men because so many young boys currently grow up surrounded by confusion. Many never see healthy masculinity modeled consistently at home, online, or in entertainment. Without guidance, they naturally imitate whatever culture celebrates most loudly. That's why he believes raising boys intentionally is so important. Teach them respect, teach them purpose, teach them discipline, teach them compassion and integrity. Teach them they were created for more than temporary pleasure and selfish ambition. The speaker reflects again on his son Malachi and the intentional conversations happening inside their home. His wife constantly reminds their son that he carries purpose, intelligence, and leadership potential. She encourages him not to blend into destructive cultural patterns, but to stand apart with wisdom and character. Those daily conversations may seem small, but according to him, they slowly shape identity over time. Young people become what they consistently hear about themselves. A child constantly exposed to wisdom, encouragement, accountability, and love develops differently than one left entirely to the influence of culture. The emotional intensity continues building as the speaker passionately calls men to rise higher, rise above addiction, rise above recklessness, rise above insecurity, rise above the lies telling them they are worthless, broken forever, or incapable of change. He says God is not calling men toward perfection overnight. He is calling them toward surrender, growth, healing, and purpose one step at a time. Every time someone chooses honesty over hiding, prayer over escapism, accountability over isolation, or discipline over impulse, transformation slowly begins happening. According to him, society is starving for real examples of integrity. Homes need stable fathers. Churches need committed men. Women need trustworthy partners. Children need mentors worth following. Communities need leaders guided by wisdom instead of selfish ambition. The speaker repeatedly says that culture has already shown people what destruction looks like. Broken families, addiction, violence, infidelity, emotional emptiness, and selfishness surround society everywhere. What people desperately need now are visible examples of restoration, character, and purpose. He tells the men listening not to underestimate the impact their lives can have when surrendered to something greater. One disciplined man can influence an entire family. One healed father can change future generations. One courageous decision can interrupt years of destructive patterns. Then the tone softens again as he reminds struggling men that God's invitation remains available no matter how messy their story feels right now. Some may feel ashamed of their past. Others may believe they have failed too many times already. But according to the speaker, God's grace reaches even into those places. He says God is essentially speaking to wounded men, saying, "Come closer, let me heal you, let me guide you. Let me show you the purpose you were created for." The invitation is not based on someone already being perfect. It is based on willingness to stop running away and finally move toward healing. The speaker becomes emotional again while describing men physically supporting one another during the closing prayer. He asks people sitting nearby to place a hand on the shoulder of a man next to them as a symbolic reminder that they are not alone. The room becomes deeply moved by the moment. He explains that many men have spent years without affirmation, encouragement, or emotional support. Some never heard positive words from fathers growing up. Others learned to suppress vulnerability completely. That simple act of support during prayer represented love, acceptance, and connection many desperately needed. According to him, sometimes healing begins through simple reminders that someone sees you, cares about you, and believes restoration is still possible. God's presence can work through human encouragement, community, and compassion just as powerfully as through preaching itself. As the prayer continues, he asks God to raise up Proverbs 31 men prepared to lead with wisdom, love with integrity, and pursue purpose faithfully, not perfect men, but growing men. Men willing to reject destructive cultural narratives and pursue something deeper instead. The speaker closes this section by reminding the audience that the rest of the Proverbs 31 series will continue unpacking these themes further. The upcoming messages will explore the qualities of the virtuous woman, but this first message established the foundation clearly. Before discussing the kind of person worth pursuing, people must first confront the condition of their own hearts, character, and purpose. As the sermon reaches its final conclusion, the speaker leaves the audience with one overwhelming message. God is still calling people higher no matter how broken, distracted, or lost they currently feel. Throughout the entire teaching, he has challenged cultural definitions of masculinity, relationships, success, and identity. But now everything comes together around one central truth. Transformation is possible when people stop running from God and start moving toward him instead. He reminds the audience once again that Proverbs 31 was never meant to become just another social media hashtag or a list of impossible standards. At its core, this chapter is a conversation about wisdom, character, purpose, and the type of life God desires for his people. Long before it became famous and online, it began as a mother desperately trying to protect her son from destruction. That perspective completely changes the way the chapter should be understood. This wasn't empty religious advice spoken casually into the air. These were deeply personal words spoken by someone who loved her son enough to challenge him honestly. She understood how easily culture could pull him away from purpose, so she intentionally confronted the areas most capable of destroying his future. The speaker explains that those same dangers still exist today, even though society looks different now. Lust still destroys focus, addiction still traps people emotionally and spiritually. Pride still blinds people from wisdom, misuse power still damages lives and relationships. The cultural narratives may evolve over time, but human struggles remain remarkably similar generation after generation. He says modern culture constantly pressures people to seek validation through appearance, money, pleasure, popularity, and status. Men are told to measure worth through sexual conquest, power, and material success. Women are pressured to define themselves through beauty standards, relationships, and public approval. Social media intensifies those pressures by creating non-stop comparison. But according to the speaker, God's word continuously exposes how empty those pursuits eventually become. Cars lose value. Popularity fades, physical beauty changes with time, addictions betray people, temporary pleasure disappears quickly. If identity is built entirely on external things, life eventually collapses when those things fail. That is why Proverbs 31 keeps redirecting attention toward character instead. Character survives when appearances fade. Integrity matters when nobody is watching. Wisdom protects people from self-destruction. Purpose creates stability in seasons where emotions and circumstances constantly change. The speaker strongly emphasizes that this invitation toward wisdom is available for everyone, not just church leaders or spiritually mature people. Men struggling with lust can still grow. Women carrying insecurity can still heal. Families affected by brokenness can still rebuild. Nobody is disqualified from transformation simply because they have weaknesses or scars. He explains that spiritual maturity does not happen instantly. Character develops through repeated choices over time. Every decision either moves someone closer toward wisdom or deeper into destructive patterns. That's why small daily habits matter more than dramatic emotional moments. Prayer matters because it reconnects people to God instead of isolation. Accountability matters because hidden struggles grow stronger in darkness. Discipline matters because unchecked desires eventually control people. Community matters because nobody was designed to carry life's burdens completely alone. The speaker says many people secretly desire change but feel exhausted because they have failed repeatedly in the past. Some have promised themselves countless times they would stop certain behaviors only to fall back into them again later. Over time, disappointment convinces them they will never truly change. But he pushes against that hopelessness directly. According to him, growth is rarely perfect or immediate. The important thing is continuing to move toward healing even after setbacks happen. A man who falls but keeps getting back up is still moving forward. Someone who keeps returning to God despite weakness is already refusing defeat. He reminds the audience that God's love is not based on flawless performance. God does not wait until people become perfect before caring about them. In fact, many of the people God transforms most powerfully are those fully aware of how broken they actually are. The speaker becomes emotional again while describing how many men carry silent shame because they feel they failed their families, relationships, or responsibilities. Some regret past choices involving addiction, infidelity, anger, abandonment, or selfishness. Others feel crushed by insecurity and comparison. Yet according to him, shame often keeps people trapped because it convinces them they are too far gone to seek help. The enemy wants people isolated, hidden, and hopeless. God, however, calls people into honesty, healing, and restoration. He tells the audience that there is tremendous freedom in finally admitting weakness instead of pretending to have everything together. Real growth begins when people stop hiding behind fake confidence and start honestly confronting the areas where they need help. The speaker then shifts back toward the importance of purpose. He says one of the greatest tragedies in life is watching people waste years chasing distractions while neglecting the purpose they were created for. Culture constantly offers endless forms of entertainment and escape capable of consuming entire lives without producing anything meaningful, but purpose changes perspective. A man focused on purpose begins viewing decisions differently. He becomes more careful about relationships, habits, and influences because he understands his life carries responsibility beyond temporary pleasure. The speaker says this applies not only to men, but to everyone listening. Every person leaves some kind of impact behind. Parents shape children. Leaders influence communities. Friends affect one another. Even private choices eventually spill into public consequences. That is why wisdom matters so deeply. According to Proverbs 31, wisdom protects people from wasting their lives on things that ultimately destroy peace, relationships, and purpose. Wisdom teaches restraint when culture celebrates recklessness. Wisdom teaches discipline when society rewards indulgence. Wisdom teaches humility when pride becomes fashionable. The speaker revisits the image of Lemuel's mother one final time. While most people overlook her completely, she quietly represents the power of intentional guidance, prayer, and spiritual influence. She saw greatness inside her son and courageously spoke truth into his life instead of remaining silent. He believes society desperately needs more voices like that today. Parents willing to guide children intentionally, mentors willing to challenge younger generations, communities willing to encourage growth instead of glorifying dysfunction, friends willing to speak truth instead of enabling destruction. The speaker also encourages listeners to examine the voices currently influencing their own lives. Social media personalities, celebrities, music, online culture, and peer pressure constantly shape perspectives whether people realize it or not. If someone continually consumes unhealthy messages, eventually those ideas begin shaping desires, decisions, and identity. That's why he repeatedly urges people to stay connected to truth, prayer, wisdom, and healthy community. Without intentional guidance, human nature naturally drifts toward whatever feels easiest or most pleasurable in the moment, but long-term peace rarely comes from short-term impulses. As the final prayer continues, the speaker asks God to raise up stronger families, wiser men, and healthier relationships rooted in character rather than selfishness. He prays for healing where there has been insecurity, addiction, bitterness, and emotional pain. He specifically asks God to help men overcome cultural lies, convincing them that recklessness equals strength. According to him, real masculinity is not proven through domination, ego, or sexual conquest. Real strength appears through discipline, responsibility, leadership, humility, and integrity. He also prays for women listening to recognize their value beyond society's shallow standards. Instead of measuring worth through appearance or external approval, he encourages them to pursue wisdom, strength, faithfulness, and purpose as well. The speaker explains that the upcoming messages in the series will unpack the famous virtuous woman passage in greater detail, but he wanted this first message to establish an important foundation first. Before discussing relationships, people must first examine themselves honestly. What kind of character are they building? What habits are shaping them daily? What cultural narratives are influencing their thinking? Are they moving toward purpose or slowly drifting into distraction? Those questions matter because healthy relationships cannot exist without healthy people. Lasting marriages cannot be built on selfishness and immaturity alone. Families become stronger when individuals pursue wisdom and healing personally before demanding perfection from others. The speaker passionately tells the audience that one transformed life can impact generations. A healed father changes a household. A disciplined young man influences friends. A wise mother shapes children. A person who chooses integrity instead of compromise creates ripple effects reaching far beyond what they may ever see directly. He returns once more to the image of God, calling people closer. Even those filled with doubt, confusion, or spiritual uncertainty are invited to continue seeking him. The journey toward wisdom often begins simply by taking one honest step forward instead of continuing to run away. According to him, God understands human weakness fully yet still believes transformation is possible, that truth should create hope rather than fear. Nobody listening is beyond restoration. Nobody is too damaged to begin changing direction. As the service finally comes to an end, the emotional atmosphere remains heavy. The audience has heard strong confrontation, but they have also heard compassion, hope, and invitation. The message was never about condemning people for imperfection. It was about calling them towards something greater than the empty promises culture constantly offers. The speaker closes by encouraging everyone to continue through the rest of the Proverbs 31 journey together. The next teachings will dive deeper into the qualities of the virtuous woman and what healthy biblical relationships truly look like. But before exploring any of that, this first message made one thing absolutely clear. Wisdom begins when people stop allowing culture to define and start allowing character, purpose, and God's truth to shape the direction of their lives instead.